So, my relationship with this franchise has drastically changed over the years, and the public's relationship with The Strangers has also changed, just not in the same way. So, there was a time many years ago when certainly the first Strangers film was considered something of a hidden gem, probably still is, but it was regarded as this secret cult classic that maybe not a lot of horror fans have seen, but they should, you know. Oh, it's such a simple concept. Three strangers turning up at a house and you don't know why they're there. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's great. You've got to see it. And I saw it. I thought it was absolute crap. I've got to be honest. And so for years afterwards, I never bothered watching the second one. Why would I? But I kept hearing people talking up that film. And every time they did, I'd be like, are you serious? This again? Frigging strangers. But then I finally did watch the second one, and I thought it was amazing, like way better than the first one. And then just a couple of months further on, I watched The Strangers Chapter 1, the first film of this new trilogy, really enjoyed that one as well. So suddenly out of nowhere, I was in the position of really enjoying two of the three films, and my whole position had changed. But it was around about this time that the public's opinion was going the other way, because this seems to be a franchise that people like to give a good kicking to now. It's as if there's no appetite for the reboot trilogy. When the first film came out, critically, the film was not reviewed very well, and even horror fans in general, if you go on forums, Facebook, YouTube, so many people were down on that first film of the new trilogy, and it's been kind of the same with Chapter 2, I've noticed. So I'm in a weird position where I'm like a rare mouthpiece who's standing up for the strangers now. But how have I ended up in this position? I didn't ask for this position. How did I even get here after a few years back being one of those people who was totally down on the strangers when everybody else loved it? It's been an amazing kind of switching of positions. But I think the main reason why people have not taken to these new films is not because it's a reboot. We've had loads of reboots over the last 20 years in horror, and when they're done right, people really like them. I think the biggest reason people are not into these films is because three of them were made basically at the same time and were being given them piecemeal, like one every 2 or 3 years. And from the get-go, everybody has known that they're not going to get an ending with Chapter 1. You're going to have to wait until the end of the three films to get the full definitive conclusion. And I just think people are really cynical about that. But I do think that once all three have been released, there could be a bit of a renaissance for this whole project. I genuinely think that as long as they don't shit the bed and make a really awful part 3, then I think you could see a turning around again for the whole Strangers brand. It could regain its respect, kind of thing, and that would be nice to see, because this is such an interesting experiment that Renny Harlin has done. It's basically a 4-hour slasher movie set over the same weekend, and you just never see that, really. Like, certainly not in films. I know there was that TV show a few years ago called Slasher, which sort of has a story set over like 5 or 6, 7 hours, I don't know, 6 or 7 episodes, whatever. But that's not the same as doing it in films. And The Strangers is attempting that. And me personally, I think the first 2 chapters that we've had so far have been very good. And I'm really intrigued to see if they can finish it off with that third film. But once all 3 parts are available and people can just watch this thing in one long flow, I really do wonder if opinions will suddenly turn again. It's going to be fascinating. I'm sure I don't necessarily need to give you a plot outline for The Strangers, but just in case, I'll give you a very quick synopsis of where we're at. So the first film, basically a remake of the 2008 film, but set at a woodland lodge instead of an urban house on a street. But at the end of the first one, the strangers accidentally leave the final girl alive. So at the beginning of Chapter 2, this woman, her character name I cannot remember, so I'm just going to call her by her actress name throughout this review, Madelaine Petsch. She's recovering in a local hospital, a bit like Laurie Strode at the beginning of Halloween 2. But once the strangers find out where she is, then they immediately head to try and get her. And we are then into what is basically a really long chase movie for most of Chapter 2. And it's really awesome, actually. Straight away we get this incredible sequence where this poor woman is being pursued all over this hospital at night time, and it's really genuinely great. If you've ever seen Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, one of the most respected sequences from that film is the hospital chase near the beginning. I would say the one in Strangers 2 is even better, and it doesn't turn out to be a dream. This chase really sets a high bar for the rest of the movie. But it would be wrong to say that the entire movie is just all one long chase, because I have seen this criticism in one or two reviews. But there are times when Madelaine Petsch is coming across various people on her travels, but she's suspicious that she might actually be talking to the strangers, or one or two of them, but with their masks off. So there's a great sense of paranoia and mystery in this film, because we, the audience, haven't a clue whether these people she's come across are strangers or not. And the film makes it really hard to guess as well. So the movie kind of has two modes. One of which is when there's just an out-and-out chase going on, or some version of cat and mouse where we know the strangers are right there somewhere with their masks on. Or there's this other state of being where something social is happening, but we're not sure if the strangers are in our presence. And it's really effective. And this is something that I think has been added this time that wasn't in the first movie, because I don't remember the strangers really taking their masks off at any point and going back to who they normally are. I think pretty much from when they turn up with their masks on, it's like that for the rest of that first movie. One criticism I've seen about this movie that I do think is valid is this idea that we find out way too much about the villains. I think we find out more about the strangers in this film than in any of the previous three combined. So we get all these flashbacks where we find out about how two of the strangers became evil as kids. Not the third stranger, funnily enough. Maybe that will come with the finale film. I would prefer it if they at least preserve the mystery of one of the three strangers, but my instincts tell me that no, we'll probably find out what this third stranger is all about eventually. But for now, it's just two of them in across maybe 4 or 5 different flashback sequences throughout the film. They don't linger too long when they arrive, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy these scenes when they were on. They are entertaining, they are fun, and the kids that they've hired to play these roles, they're very good. I found them very believable as sinister, evil kids whose heads are just completely screwed up. I just don't think we needed to find out about the personalities of the strangers, and I think a lot of people would agree with me on this. We also find out where the whole Tamara thing comes from. Now, this is one of the best things about this franchise, this weird thing they do where they turn up on the doorstep and just ask about Tamara. We didn't need to find out the answer to this, and yet this film gives us an answer. It's not the worst explanation that they could have come up with, I suppose, but I still didn't want it, you know. If they'd have done what they did in The Dark Knight, you know, when the Joker explains his scars, but then half an hour later we get a different explanation, and then another one, and then by the end of the movie you're not quite sure what the true explanation is. If they'd have done something like this somehow, I wouldn't have minded that. But no, we get this one definitive explanation of where Tamara comes from, and I just didn't want it. Incidentally, we don't actually have the name Tamara in the UK. We generally say Tamara. I've actually got a friend called Tamara, but I don't think there's ever been a Tamara in the UK. That would be my guess anyway. It's just one of those things that's different on each side of the Atlantic. Another part I found disappointing is when Madelaine stumbles across the same house that she spent most of the first movie in, and there's like police tape around the outside, etc. But I thought this was a missed opportunity to do something clever, you know, tie it into the first movie somehow, have some new reveal about the house maybe. But as it is, I think she just changes a couple of garments and then moves on again. And it's like, I just feel like more could have been done with this scene. And the end to the film is a little bit lame, to be honest. You won't even realise that you're watching the final battle/finale until you suddenly look back and realise that that was the final battle/finale. They needed something grander to finish things off, something like the hospital chase from earlier on, for example. I don't think it's giving much away to tell you that the words "to be continued" pop up on the screen just before the end credits, and clearly not everybody in my cinema screening was aware that this is the middle chapter of a trilogy, because as soon as those words came up, a woman somewhere behind me shouted out, "What the fuck?" Clearly she wasn't impressed with the idea that she wasn't going to be getting a conclusion to this story on the night. I do have some sympathy for her, but I'm going to finish off my review with a positive, because I think overall this movie is very positive. So I'm going to quickly mention the animal attack scene, which is kind of cool. Now, this is something that I'd seen used as another criticism against the movie in a lot of the reviews I'd seen. So I wasn't looking forward to this moment necessarily, but I think it looks excellent. I'm not going to tell you what animal is used, by the way. I'll leave some of the surprise intact for you. But the CGI is really good. And the behaviour pattern of the animal, I think, is really accurate and genuinely scary. So really enjoyed the scene. Right, it's time to get to the bag of terror so I can show you what score I'm going to give The Strangers Chapter 2. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Michael Myers carving knives out of 5. I think I gave Chapter 1 3.5. So for me, this is an uptick. It's a thoroughly good film in my opinion. Yeah, there are a few things here that you could criticise, but ultimately I was really entertained. From start to finish, I was on the edge of my seat watching this poor woman trying to escape these people, and I really enjoyed the movie. I was in a good mood on the way home. It is a movie that emphasises chase sequences over kills, I'd say, but my personal sensibilities when it comes to horror is just that I do prefer a good chase to a good kill. So the movie appealed to me. I'd definitely encourage you to give it a try, although obviously you will be waiting probably another year or two to get the concluding chapter. Right, we'll leave it there for today, but before we go, let's have a quick reading update. So I've just finished reading The Talisman by Stephen King. I'm trying to read through his books in the rough chronological order that he wrote them. I believe this is the 16th book on my adventure, and I would say it's my least favourite of the 16. I can appreciate that he wrote this one with a friend of his called Peter Straub. It was like a co-production. Maybe that threw Stephen off his game a little bit with this one, because it's just not a book for me. It's more of a fantasy adventure than a horror book. So it's about this boy called Jack Sawyer who has to travel from the east coast of America to the west coast in order to get this artifact called the Talisman, which will apparently cure his mother's cancer. And along the way, he can slip in and out of this alternative world called the Territories. And he does this generally when he wants to avoid the villains. But I found this book an absolute bore for the most part. It's almost 1,000 pages long. It's a long book, this. I needed a lot of sessions to get through this. There's a couple of sections I kind of liked, like when Jack gets trapped in this boarding house. The pages went a bit faster for me during those parts. And also there's a few chapters in something called The Blasted Lands near the end, which I thought were quite entertaining. But most of the rest of the book was difficult for me. This is just not a book that I particularly liked, I've got to say. So sorry, Stephen, didn't like this one, but I do forgive you. However, I'm only going to give The Talisman a generous 2 out of 5. Right, we really will leave it there for today this time. Thank you for joining me for my review of The Strangers Chapter 2. Please follow me on X if you haven't already, and I'll catch you all again next time. Bye-bye.